The church spends millions upon millions of dollars every year on sound, lighting, and production. Some churches have better production quality than most primetime television stations. The question is, why? Let's talk about it. Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Tanner, and welcome to Episode 3 of Taboo Talks podcast, where we dive into subjects that don't get talked about, and we talk about them. And today, I'm super excited about the episode that we're shooting because it is about something that I feel like is pretty niche, but I feel like it's important for us to talk about it. We're going to talk about today all things church media, production, lighting, all that type of stuff. And today, to talk about that is one of the most sharpest guys that I know. I feel like he is the most qualified person I know to answer my questions today, and that is the one and the only Andrew, the man, Drew Jones. Andrew, how you feeling today?
I'm feeling good. It's good to be here.
Nice. I see you got pants on.
It's a first for me.
I know, man. I was told that you only put pants on. Well, never, actually. I don't actually know if there's a...
I wear gym shorts to church on Sundays. I put pants on for this.
Do you hear that, guys? I need a minute. But anyway, I want you to tell the audience, the viewers, a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, what you're all about.
Yeah, so I work at Clawson full-time. I've been here on staff for 6 years. I've been doing church media for 9 years. Started as a volunteer in our youth room because I like computers, and it sort of evolved into this big passion for me. I learned that God really had a calling on my life for this sort of thing. I've got a knack for it. And so I got really plugged in here, got really involved with production, and went full-time in production in 2020, and I've been here ever since.
Nice. So I want to ask this question. At what point did you know that this was if there was a point, what point did you know that this is what you were, that you wanted to do for the long term?
I had some experiences here that I feel like really set me up for a good future. I had some great mentors ahead of me. They were pouring knowledge into me all the time. And just encouraging me to learn more and grow in my gifting. And around the time I figured out I actually had a gifting for media was when those mentors and stuff were pouring into me. And so sometime around 3 years into just volunteer work, I realized that this is what God had called me to do. And so I went head first.
Absolutely. And I ask that question to a lot of people because I feel like one of the hardest things to do as a human being is to discover what your purpose is. I don't remember who said this, but it was somebody a lot smarter than me. They said there are two points in a person's life that are significant: the day they're born and the day they figure out why. And so I always like to ask people, when did you know that you were created to do whatever it is that you're doing? Because sometimes people, it's a moment, it's a light bulb moment where it's just, they're doing it and it's like, there's a voice that speaks to them and it's like, this is what you're supposed to be doing. And in some instances, it's just like, man, I just did it and I liked it and I never stopped doing it. And so there's no really one size fits all to discovering your purpose. You just got to kind of keep your ear tuned to the Lord and let him lead you and guide you in those things. And so I want to go into question number one. And my first question so today the podcast is titled Sincerely the Sound Man, which basically means that this is a podcast that is formatted in a way where you are basically writing a letter to the church or to people that may be inquisitive to what it is that you do. And so I want to start off by asking you, is there anything that you would like to get off of your chest when it comes to the church leadership, people in general, anything like that?
I want to talk to the other sound guys that might be listening. I see an attitude or a posture in a lot of media guys that they see themselves as the sole authority over production, about what happens in the room, how loud it's supposed to be, how bright it's supposed to be. And I just want to remind you that if you're serving in media in your local church, you're there to serve. And that's what you've been called to do. That's what you've been asked to do. And that's it. You're not supposed to be the guy in the big chair. You're not supposed to be calling all the shots. You're not supposed to be making people feel little about themselves because they don't know as much about media as you do. But just reminding you that you're there to serve. And that's what it's really all about. Additionally, I want to talk to our congregation that might be listening, not necessarily Clausen's congregation, but if you go to a church somewhere, be kind to your media guys. It's a lot of pressure to show up every week, and everyone expects it to be perfect because nobody notices when everything goes right, but everybody notices when it goes wrong. And so if it is going wrong, or if you do have a comment you'd like to make to your media team, just be kind about it, because everyone is not kind. And so if you actually want to be heard and you want to stand out and have yourself heard to them, you got to be kind about it.
Yeah. So I'm not an AVL guy. I have learned a lot of things about AVL and like general church media stuff just because I was on staff at a small church for about 3 years, and basically I had to do a lot of the stuff there until, the Lord sent an incredible guy that took over that. But I would say that one of the most frustrating things that I have ever experienced in my ministry career is there have been several instances and occasions where I'll be at a meeting or a revival meeting, or I'm somewhere going to church somewhere, and something happens, or the preacher will ask the sound person to do something that probably they didn't ask them to do beforehand. They weren't prepared. And then it's like, I've watched people just, that sound, what are you doing back there? Are you sitting on your hands? And so Andrew is so right, man. When everything goes right, you don't even think about it. But the second that any minute thing goes wrong, the very first thing that people do is they turn around and look at the sound guy almost in unison as like this harmony chorus of just inquisition. Oh my God. And so I think that that's good advice. Remember that your media people are human beings too. They have feelings, they have emotions. And whenever there is a glitch or something on the screen, you don't have to turn around and give them the death stare. So I appreciate you for sharing that. But enough of that rambling. We're going to get into question number 2. And question number 2 is, like I said in the intro, the church has spent millions upon millions upon millions of dollars on AVL, on production, on lighting, on salaries for AVL guys, experts, soundboards. And maybe you can kind of give us a little bit of an insight on how much money it really takes to put together an effective media department or whatnot. But we spend millions of dollars on church AVL and production every single year. But some people probably heard me say that and went, oh my God, we spend that much money on that stuff when there's homeless people out on the street. Well, I mean, like, why are we spending all this money on church media, AVL, and production?
You have to remember that we're in a culture that values technology. If you show up at a church, you expect it to be nice because everything that you watch at home is nice. Everything you're watching on Disney, everything you see on Netflix, everything you see on YouTube even is produced to perfection. And so there's this growing pressure from everyone who comes that it needs to be good. And I don't know if that's necessarily a healthy thing or not. It's probably not. But it's the reality that we're in. And I think churches are sort of feeling the effect of that. Some of them are taking it, I think, to more of an extreme than others. So we don't pour millions and millions here. Mm-hmm. We spend about 5% of our annual budget on technology. And so I don't feel like we're out of proportion in any sort of way. But yeah, there are some churches that I feel like probably go over the top, spend a little more than they necessarily have to. But that's just because they probably value it higher than we do here. And, I'll leave that between them and God. Yeah. I don't really know. But yeah, we spend about 5%, not necessarily millions and millions, but that equals out to be probably $80,000 a year here for us. But what that goes to is, the sound has to stay operational. Mm-hmm. Stuff breaks. You got to fix it.
Yeah.
You want it to sound good. And so we're making improvements. You want it to look good. We make improvements there. We're hosting a live stream. We're paying people that have a specific skill set that we value. If they're great at audio and we want to bring them on the team, maybe slip a little cash your way.
Yeah.
Just because we value them here. And so all of that adds up. And some churches are just bigger than others. And so it adds up higher numbers than we do. Us, it's 80,000 for A church of 250,000 people, it's probably in the millions, sure. Just because that is how much money it takes to do something like that. But remember that we're not neglecting the areas like outreach. We're not neglecting areas that really impact people's lives directly, because the amount of our budget that goes towards that is exponentially higher than is what is going to the media.
It's not either or, it's both and.
It's both.
Yeah.
And so don't get caught up in the actual number. I focus more on the proportion, because we definitely value reaching people way more than we value the color purple behind us looking just absolutely perfect.
Sure.
Or the screen being just bright enough or anything like that.
Sure. Yeah, I think that that's super good. And I also think it's important, because you mentioned churches of 250,000, that there are actually churches today that they have more people that attend their church off-site, out of state, where they can't physically come to the church. And so these churches are dumping all this money into the production as to make it as good of an experience as they can, because they know that families are sitting in the living room with their kids and they're having church service. Now, whether or not you agree that people should be doing that is irrelevant, but for us to disagree that something is happening doesn't negate the reality of it happening. And so I thought that was a really good point, that, if you have a church like Clawson there was a family that was here from Idaho, and they were members of Clawson through the online platform that you built and that your team maintains. And so it's not either or, it's both and I think that it's really important that we make that statement and that people hear that, because there is a lot of money spent on church media, and it is because we live in a digital age. Once again, should we have to spend millions of dollars or $80,000 a year on sound, AVL, and production? It doesn't matter. The fact is that we have these are areas that we have to serve. We have to serve the digital platform, and so I honor Clawson. I honor this church that they do value high quality broadcast and all different types of things. And so I appreciate the way that you answered that. My next question is going to be, do you feel like that there is a point where we're just taking it way too far? Like the AVL, the production is just like over the top.
Yeah. And I've been a part of some things that I feel like were probably over the top. But the line is kind of fuzzy. There's no hard line that says this is too far or whatever, because it all depends on the context and it depends on the culture of the people that you're with. The idea behind production is that it's to support what the Spirit is doing in the room, or it's to support what God is doing at your church. And so if at any point you're so media heavy that you're pulling people away from that, I feel like that's probably too far. But my team, we go to every extent to make sure that it's still great, but that we're not distracting people from the Word of God. We're not pulling them out of a worship experience. There's also something called means of grace, that anything that helps you engage in worship is a means of grace. Yeah. And so you might not think about it like this, but lyrics on the screen are a means of grace. Colored lighting is a means of grace. A dark room, pretty sound, anything like that can help assist people in worship. And so as long as we are in a posture where we are assisting people in worship and not distracting them from it, I think we're in the clear. I don't feel like there's any too far, as long as that's your heart and that's what you're actually executing. But as soon as you're in a position where you feel like it's up to you to create the moment, it's up to you to make this spectacular experience where people can't help but raise their hands, I think you're out of the mindset that you're supposed to be in, and you're probably going to take things too far.
For sure. That's a good answer. I want to kind of balance out the question. Do we think that sometimes people go too far? And I would like to add the statement, I feel like sometimes churches don't go far enough. I remember several years ago, my aunt and uncle, we loaded up and we went to go to a revival out of town, and it was at a small church that an evangelist that we personally knew was preaching at. And so we get there and we're excited and we walk in, and it's just a really small country church. And then they turn the sound system on like right before worship, and you just hear a big pop. And if you know anything about sound, you know that You know the sound. And so it kind of scared us, and we're like, okay, well, praise God, we're awake now. The coffee is activated.
Hallelujah.
And then right after that happens, there's just this loud, just the entire, and this is a revival meeting, okay? A Pentecostal Holy Ghost revival meeting that lasted probably 2 hours. And the entire time the sound system was on, all you could hear, and it wasn't subtle, it wasn't quiet, it was the entire time. And so whatever God wanted to do that night, I believe that God is powerful enough and talented enough to do it in spite of our whatever that was called. But that's really all I remember from that meeting. And I felt like it was a huge distraction, and it wasn't a means of grace. It was mean, all right, but not means of grace. And so do you feel like there is a point, maybe you can speak to this, do you feel like maybe that there is a measurable place that a church can be at where it's like, okay, hey guys, we got to step up your game a little bit? Or is it ever healthy to just say, hey guys, things are going so bad, let's not use a sound system? The church is small enough where we can just cut everything off and do this old school style.
Yeah, that's a really funny story because I've been in a couple of places like that too.
I'll never forget it. If you ever heard the teacher with the nails on the chalkboard, that is, or if you've ever scraped your fork against your plate, that's exactly, but for an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Yeah, there is a point where if you're in a smaller church and that's your reality, it's probably worth considering. Let's invest in something better. Let's fix this, or let's just scrap the whole thing. I talk to a lot of churches that we want to do a good live stream, but honestly, might not be the best idea. It's probably better for you to not do a live stream at all rather than do something that's bad, because you don't want to give yourself a bad public image, but you don't want to invest a whole lot of money in something that you don't need either. So yeah, there is a point where it's so bad that I'm gonna use this term, crap or get off the pot. Yeah. Like you got to go in, or you just got to get out.
Yeah.
And so I think media is a good thing, and it's something that churches should invest in when they're ready. But if they're not at that point yet, I would, maybe not. If you've got a small enough place, get an acoustic guitar, do a little in the round session or something, and just worship with your voices.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
And let me just be clear. We're not poking fun at churches that have issues, technical issues. It's just us wanting to bring light to help maybe somebody that's watching this understand that sometimes, this is just my mentality. My kryptonite is I'm a perfectionist that lacks the ability to be perfect. And that is, it's so frustrating because like every time I preach, I'm always, the second I get off the pulpit, I'm just thinking like, I didn't hit that high point, or I didn't say that thing. And so like with the podcast, when we started it out, I mean, I literally prayed. I was like, God, I don't want to put out a bad quality podcast. I don't want people to tune into the podcast and have to suffer through it because they love me, or like, I want people to be able to tune into the podcast. It look good. It sound good. It feel good. And so, thankfully, I had somebody that was willing to let us borrow their equipment. And, I'm very thankful for that. But I think that the reason for that is not because I just want it to look nice. It's because me personally, if I'm scrolling through YouTube and I see a podcast and it's all grainy, I'm not even going to click on it because I'm just going to assume that it's also going to sound bad. And so it might be worth making yourself analyze what you got, and asking the question, hey, do I want this to be on the internet? Do I want this to be what our image is to the public, people that don't know who we are? Because you have to remember that when you put something out online, I've already been subject to it with this podcast 2 episodes in, that people don't know you and they will still speak their mind. And all that they have is that picture, and all that they have is that sound and what you say. And so I think there does come a point in time where you do have to say, we probably should wait until we get a little bit nicer equipment, or maybe, and there's simple issues. Set up your phone. If you're a smaller church and you maybe can't afford the cameras, you maybe can't afford the Mevos or whatever, everybody has a smartphone. And if you don't have a smartphone, somebody in your congregation has a smartphone, and you can set it up, and they sell little Bluetooth mics that you can pin onto your shirt, and boom, you've got a decent quality live stream. And so I think that that's good. Now, you said something earlier that I really kind of want to touch on. You said that the media is there to serve or support the moment. Okay, so that really caught my attention, because I want to know, what do you mean by that? So what do you mean by the media? The media team is there to serve the moment or support the moment?
Well, when I first started in media, I had the misconception that, it's kind of up to us to create this perfect environment where people can encounter God. But the reality is, God's going to move whether we do anything or not. So it's really up to us to just reinforce the move. And what I mean by that is clear sound that people enjoy, that is not feeding back. It amplifies God's word. It's doing all of these things to support what God's doing, or what pastor is preaching, or what's coming out of the Bible, or something like that. So that's what I mean. You want it to look good. You want it to be a good presentation. Because if people come in, you can't see pastor, you can't hear him, like that's not going to fly.
Right.
You're not getting anywhere with that, especially in a 700 seat room like we're in right now. That's not going to work.
Sure.
And so media is there to help people engage. We're here to support what God is doing, or the message that he has to speak to his people that day. And so that's really all media is for. And if your perception of media is anything other than that, I personally believe that you're just wrong.
So you believe that there are people out there that their mentality is not, we're here to serve the moment, but we're here to create the moment.
Yeah. I've run into a couple people like that personally.
What's their names? No, I'm just kidding. I'm joking.
But when you run into somebody like that, you can kind of tell, because they just have this head about them that is like, oh, it's up to me or something. And, I started that way too. But a couple years in, God really humbled me, and he changed my heart towards that sort of thing. Really gave me a heart for worship and a heart for people to engage in worship. And that's really what it's all about.
I feel like, as a Christian, that is the safest place that you can arrive at in your heart, is that, hey, I am not the one that's making this happen. I am the one that maybe God put in this particular position to steward what he's going to do, but it's God that's making all this happen. And so, man, it's frustrating too in the preaching field and the pastor field, where these guys have this mentality of, man, if it's not me, if I can't preach. I know guys that if they're not preaching and if they go out of town, they'll close the church down for that week. And then it's not throwing a punch at those guys, but it's just, we can really arrive at a place of arrogance, where we think that if we're not on point, and if we don't do it just like we did in rehearsal, God can't move. And I come to find that God moves a lot more prominently in the moments where we're just like, what's going on? What's happening? Oh no, one of the LED screens is turned off, like one of the cameras is doing something crazy. And then all of a sudden, boom, God does something great.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's awesome. I do want to ask you this just for funsies. I want you to give me, just off the top of your head, it doesn't have to be perfect, but just off the top of your head, give me some things that you wish let me ask it this way. Give me some things that you wish that you could tell any media director that's watching this podcast. Just random pieces of advice. You don't have to, that's who you're speaking to. You're speaking to somebody who knows the language that you're speaking. Go.
So, number one, if you're in that same mindset that I started out in, as in, you pick somebody out of the audience that's not really engaged in worship, and you're thinking, I'm going to mix this worship set so good that they can't help but lift their hands. If you're in that spot, you're setting yourself up to be so discouraged. Because if something happens and that person doesn't lift their hands, or if you don't feel like things went absolutely perfect, you're just going to be racking your head all week. What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? Why didn't it go well? Or something like that. And you're just going to be in this downward spiral. It's a hard spot to be. And so, prayerfully consider, like, God, change my heart. Put yourself in a posture of service towards your Savior. you're in here to worship, and you're in here to serve the people that are worshiping. And so that's advice number one. Advice number two, forget about the gear. Gear is fun. People get into tech because they like gear. They like cameras. They like soundboards or whatever. But forget all of it. People are your biggest asset. Your team is your biggest asset. If you're going to invest, if you got a $50 budget for the whole month, get all of your guys together, spend that $50 on Chick-fil-A or something, have a community time, build a relationship with those people. And then together, like if you guys are unified, if there's unity amongst your team, you guys are all here for the same purpose, and that's to assist and worship, everything's going to be dynamite.
Yeah.
Everything else will work itself out. There's a point where you probably should invest in some better gear, but like if you're in a position where your stuff works and you have the opportunity to grow your team, make them stronger, that's what you should be doing.
That's good. At the end of the day, you could have the nicest equipment that money can buy, but without people to run that equipment, it's useless. And so Andrew's like, not on my watch. It's like I run it all by myself. No, I'm just kidding.
No way, bro.
I'm totally kidding. I think that, man, the reason that this talk is so important is because media, the result of media is it's seen, it's out front in front of everybody, but the happenings of media is so behind the scenes. And I think that a lot of people don't really think about it. They don't really think about all that goes into it. They don't really think of it. It's like sitting down and eating a cake. You know, all that you're getting to enjoy, all that you know is the product of that cake. You don't really think about all the work that it took, you know, that your granny or your nanny put in to make that cake for you. And so I want to say that I'm very thankful for what you do and what your team does and everybody that's like you does, that feels called to do church AVL and media. Because like I said, there was a season in time where I stood in the gap and it was just like, dude, I don't want to do this. Like this is not the route for me. And so, you know, because we are the people that, you know, we may be in front of the camera, we may be giving the sermon or preaching or teaching, but you guys are the one that make sure that it's nice and it's polished and it's easy to listen to. Because I done preached some places and then went back to listen to myself and been like, wow, hey, that happened, you know? And so it's like last night, I taught in Bible study and I just heard a snippet of the thing and it's like, man, that sounds so good. For a very long time, and this is a funny thing about me, for a very long time because of the equipment that we were using, I thought that I had and I still might, but I thought that I had like a really weird voice. And I'm like, man, my voice is a lot higher pitched than I thought it was, but it come to find out it was the mixer settings on the board that was recording me. And so when I was hearing it, it was like, and thus saith the Lord in the blood. I sounded like those old school, like Billy Graham. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
What you're talking about.
And so I just want to say a massive thank you for what you do. And for if you're a media person and you're watching this, thank you for what you do as well. And speaking of media people, one more question about media is if there's any pastors or any church leaders that are watching this video and they've really listened to what we've had to say and they're like, man, you've convinced me. I'm ready to invest some resources, some people, some money into AVL and production and media. What is your advice to those people, those pastors?
Well, I'll go back to kind of what I said earlier, which is your biggest asset is your people. And so if you have the capability to maybe assist your people in some training, even if it's, you know, going to the church down the street and asking them, hey, do you have anybody that could teach us a thing or two about our gear or something like that? Just be in a posture where you are available to help your media people, especially if you're in a smaller church where, you know, we're looking to pastor for everything. And so, you know, be in a place where you can support your people, and then don't be afraid if you ask them, what do you need? And they say, we need this, this, and this. Have an open mind about that sort of stuff. Even if your stuff currently works, there could be problems behind the scenes with that stuff that you're not seeing because you're on the platform, but they're having to fight these problems every single week. And so don't be afraid to invest in something maybe slightly nicer than you have now. But again, you're going to start running into some of those diminishing returns. You don't want to spend, you know, $250,000 on a sound system if you don't need it. But I mean, if that's the area that you're at, you probably are not you probably are already set well in media. But for the smaller people, get something that is going to be good for your people, that's easy for them to use, and it's going to be good quality stuff that you can hold on to for a while, and then pour your resources into them, training them, providing for them, caring for them, and they'll stick around. They'll be good at what they do.
Right. So maybe and this is very common. This is a very common scenario. If there's somebody watching and it's a pastor, he's got 20 people in his church, and he's the one that does all the media. He did not sign up to do the media, but because of his position, he's got to do the media. What would your advice be to that person?
I would say, remember to have some realistic expectations. You're not going to look like Furtick. You're not going to look like Gateway, because those churches have insanely large teams of people doing that sort of stuff. And so don't put so much pressure on yourself for it to be perfect, and just do what you can. Because when you're in a 20-person congregation, it's okay to have some mistakes. It doesn't have to be super polished. And just focus on delivering a good word to those people and providing a good experience for them, but don't put so much pressure on yourself.
Well, dude, thank you so much for being on the podcast, man. I really do appreciate it. I know that you brought some insight. There's a lot of questions that I feel like needed answers, and I feel like there's a lot of people that learned some stuff today, and hopefully they were edified. Hopefully we were all edified. And maybe we'll have you back on the podcast, because you're not only an AVL guy, you're also an executive pastor, right? Which means you oversee the staff at your church. And so you guys don't know this, but Andrew is also a leadership guru. He won't say it, but he is. He's a great leader. People love to follow him because he's easy to follow, fun to follow, and he's great at what he does. He puts everything that he has into everything that he does. And so maybe we'll have him back on for that episode. I'd be really excited for that. But without further ado, that's going to wrap it up for episode 3. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you guys will like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below if you have an attaboy or you have a concern, or maybe we just said something that you just flat out disagree with. Let us know in the comment section, and we would love to dialogue with you. But I feel like that's really all that I've got for episode 3. We'll see you guys in episode 4. Bye.